I'm Trish Foley, Director of the Historical Society, and we'd like to welcome you this evening to our program called Coyote Talk. And this is being co-sponsored by the Historical Society and Mama Farm and Seed and the Coyote Study Group. So with this, I'd like you to join me in welcoming Isabella, and she's going to introduce the program.
Thank you. I had heard rumors that coyotes arrived in Long Island for several years, but I couldn't really get any details until Lisa Filippi, who's here. She's a PhD in biology and a friend of Mama Farm. She comes to our farm, contacted me and said, we're going to make it, we have all the statistics and all the information about the coyote. If you would like to share it with the community. And so CED and Trish, we came together to do this presentation. So the good news is that some animals that disappeared in Long Island are coming back. Coyotes were never here, but the turkeys are back. And I'm delighted. Tom Williams told me that the river otter had come back to the Carmel River. So that means that our environment is getting better and is healthier. So the people that are going to talk today is Lisa Filippi, a biologist at Hofstra University, that is in Hampstead. And then we will have Ariel Santos, an environmental scientist at CITOC Environmental Society, and Frank Vincenti, who is the founder of the Wild Dog Foundation. And we will learn more about. And Jessie, I'm waiting for you to do some drawings of the coyotes. Jessie is our fantastic artist that makes the most wonderful drawings. The coyotes, is it good news or bad news? You know, river otter, yes. Turkey, yes. Coyotes, So let's see what they have to say.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. We're so excited to be here. Again, my name is Ariel Santos. I'm from CITOC Environmental Association, which is a island-wide wildlife conservation organization. I am a conservation scientist, and I'm going to be kicking off this talk today. So we like to start off our presentations with sort of a Mythbusters game. So we're going to provide you all with some common myths about coyotes and how they got here, and then we're going to dispel those myths, and hopefully you'll share some of these facts once you leave here today with your friends and family. So our first myth is that coyotes were introduced to Long Island by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. So by a show of hands, how many people have heard that myth? Okay, got one. That's great. It's only one. So the fact of the matter is that they were not introduced by the New York State DEC. They have naturally migrated here. So coyotes live in all cities throughout the contiguous United States. They have naturally expanded into the last known territory not previously inhabited, besides Panama, which is Long Island. So they are just great at traveling, and that's how they got here. Our next myth is that coyotes pose threats to humans. So again, by a show of hands, do you agree? Do you believe that coyotes, and don't be shy, this is a judgment-free zone. Do you believe that coyotes could potentially pose a threat to humans? Yeah, of course, that makes total sense. So the reality is that coyotes are naturally wary of people. So over time, they can unlearn that fear if they're being fed or if that fear isn't reinforced, but they are quick learners, so they respond well to hazing or efforts to frighten them away. My colleague Frank will tell us a little bit about what hazing means and how to keep that sort of distance between yourself and wildlife. And so there are some instances where coyotes have approached or even bitten humans, but those encounters are largely preventable and statistically unlikely. Our last myth, I believe this is, that coyote populations need to be controlled. And again, by a raise of hands, do you believe that coyote populations need to be controlled? All right, that's fair. And studies show that when coyotes are hunted, pack social structure, which naturally limits the population growth, actually weakens. So particularly if either of the breeding pair are killed. So this means that more food availability for remaining pack members, and with better nutrition, females who may now breed at a younger age have even larger and healthier litters. So we're actually kind of making it worse, so to say. So the harder coyotes are hunted, the faster their population will grow. All right, so now I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Lisa Filippi, who's going to talk to us about the biology and natural history of coyotes.
I'm not used to sitting there. I'm going to stand. Okay, thank you, Ariel. That was great. So, why do we care about coyotes? There's so many animals on Long Island. Why are we interested in coyotes? Do we want to be interested in coyotes? So there are several different reasons. And first of all, I'll just tell you that I monitor a population, a family out in Manhasset. And these are photographs that I've taken my trail cams have taken of the animals that I've been monitoring for the past 4 years. So they're really beautiful, and that's why I love them. They're naturally introduced. They came by themselves, migrated to Long Island, and so there are several different reasons why we care about them. And one is that they're really important as natural predators. They eat small animals. So some of the larger predators that we have might want to eat larger prey, but these are a perfect size to be eating the rats and other sorts of vermin-type small mammals that we would like to not have increase in numbers. They help maintain the dynamics and the health of ecosystems. So by feeding on these smaller animals, they're helping to maintain the dynamic of trophic systems. So keeping the rodent populations down. They also remove animal carcasses. A lot of times they haven't actually killed the animal that they're feeding on, but how many people have actually walked through forests and seen dead animals hanging around? We don't really see that very often because there's a lot of natural ways that carcasses are decayed, by bacteria and other animals, and coyotes really help with that. They also remove the weak animals from the gene pool, so that's the survival of the fittest that we always hear about. The animals that can't manage to escape are the ones that are going to get eaten, and so the gene pool of that population gets a little bit stronger. They can mitigate transmission of disease because they can kill off a lot of the rodents and other animals that will carry and transmit disease. And they also increase biodiversity, and we are all about increasing biodiversity as ecologists. So there's a lot of really good reasons why we love and want to have an interest in protecting coyotes. So the eastern coyote is a little bit different from the western coyote. It's a little bit bigger. It's 30 to 50 pounds. The western is 24 to 38 pounds. It's considered to be a new species because it's a mixture of coyote and wolf genes and also regular domestic dog genes. So it's called the coy wolf, Canis oriens. Some people make it as a subspecies of the typical coyote, which is Canis latrans. I just finished reading a book called Coyote America by Dan Flores. I highly recommend it. It's an excellent book. And he went into great detail about how coyotes came to expand around the United States, and also that they're probably a mixture of red wolves. And it may even be that red wolves started out as coyotes. So there's a lot of information that is still unsettled, but they're really an interesting animal to look at. Next one. Okay, so for the ecology, so Frank and I have a little disagreement here. They are mesopredators based on their size, but I consider them as apex predators based on their ecological function in this particular habitat because we don't have anybody bigger than a coyote. So depending on your definitions, you can call them different things, but they are predators. Their original habitat was grasslands and prairies, and they have managed to cling to humans. That was one of the things that was very prominent in the book that I just read. That they follow humans because they like human habitats, because humans make garbage, and garbage brings rats. And rats are great food for coyotes. So they are very clever. So they don't limit themselves to one particular habitat. They're able to adapt to forest land, grassland, savanna, and almost any type of habitat, urban habitats. Okay, that's the big one these days. And they're omnivorous, so they eat meat, fruit, seeds. Typically, they hunt alone, but they can also hunt in packs. So they have this ability, it's called fusion fission. So they can break up and hunt individually, or they can come together and hunt as packs when there's a larger prey to take in. So that's, again, different from wolves. Wolves are much more limited in the range of behaviors. Did I mention they're clever? I mean, how many of you have heard of Wile E. Coyote? We've known from ancient man that coyotes were very, very clever animals. They educate their pups. When the young are born in early spring, so they mate in the middle of the winter, February, and then the young are born in early spring. And over the course of the summer, both parents are training the pups how to hunt and find their own food. Again, by parental care, both parents are taking care of them, extremely adaptable, and their natural instinct is to avoid humans. And I said that I've been monitoring this population for 4 years, and I know they're there. And I go there every 2 weeks to retrieve the SD cards from the trail cams, and I have only glimpsed a coyote twice. So over 4 years, I am looking for them. and so that's how human averse they are. We don't want anyone to do anything to attract them. We don't want you to leave food out. We don't want you to call them. We want them to remain averse to humans. That's the best way to keep everybody safe. So how did they get to America? So initially, the image on the left is where they had their initial range in the Midwest. And they gradually started moving north and east. And this was a natural expansion. And part of it had to do with extirpation of wolves. They tend not to hang out in the same places that wolves hang out. In fact, this book that I just finished reading, they were talking about how even in Yellowstone Park, where there were animals that were killed and they were feeding on them, the wolves were feeding on them, the wolves left, and it took 8 hours for the coyotes to come out and move on to that carcass. So they knew that there was food there, but they didn't want to be anywhere near. They wanted to wait until the wolves had moved away 8 hours of walking away from the carcass, and then the coyotes came out and fed on the carcass. So they don't, typically, occasionally, they will try to compete with wolves, but most of the time, they're moving into habitats where wolves have been extirpated. So now they're all over the United States because most wolves have been extirpated. We're bringing them back into Yellowstone Park and a couple of other places. But that's the biggest reason why they've probably expanded throughout the country. They evolved in North America. Okay, they're a native North American species. So how did they get to Long Island? So some of them have gone up through over Canada, okay? And the reason they're a little bit bigger is because they're mating with the wolves from Canada. And so that's a bigger animal. And so their heads are larger than the western coyotes. It's a bigger animal. And we're wondering also if their behavior is going to be a little bit different. So far, we don't have that evidence yet. But they're also going from the south and coming up. They come down to Connecticut. They go over bridges. They go through tunnels. They like railroad tracks. And they're just naturally finding their way here. So on these maps, again, they haven't been introduced. They found their way here by themselves. They're extremely clever, and they said there's another little island over there that we can inhabit, and we're going to do it. And they did. And so all of the stars that you see on this map are places where we've had coyote sightings. We don't have a huge population yet on Long Island, but we expect that it's going to grow. Cars are the biggest problem. The population that I'm monitoring, they had 4 pups in 2021. In 2022, there was some sort of accident that the mother lost her tail and she lost her pups. And then in 2023, she had 5 pups, and then she got hit by a car on Searingtown Road, and so she's no longer with us. And so we're waiting for the male to find another mate. And but you know, cars are a huge problem, and they're not overly reproducing. They're just reproducing enough to suit the habitat that they're in. Okay. And now I think we're going to move on to Frank.
Are we gonna arm wrestle for our disagreement?
We're good. I got a black belt.
She's got a black belt, so thank you for having us. My name is Frank Vincenti. I have a not-for-profit Wild Dog Foundation. It's an education group for wild canids throughout the world, although concentrate mostly locally. And it's an honor to be here with my esteemed colleagues and being part of the Long Island Coyote study. The group was founded in the mid-1990s when Coyote started to expand into the boroughs of New York City. So for the last couple of decades, I've been trying to prepare people for the eventual colonization of Long Island. And I'm glad to be a part of a collective thing rather than being a lone wolf, so to speak, for a long period of time. It's a very lonely job. But anyway, supposedly, as you well know, that the Northeast, as Dr. Filippi said, was a wolf-dominated ecosystem. And there's somewhat controversy to that. Fossil evidence are inconclusive. Colonial evidence is inconclusive. There's only 2 remaining wolf pelts, so to speak, one up in Albany and one in Maine, of whatever historical wolf was here. And those 2 pelts had some coyote DNA in it. Now, whether that means that it's a distinctive DNA for the supposed distinct wolf that was found here in the Northeast, as Dr. Filippi said, possibly the red wolf found in the Southeast United States, or as we see in southeastern Canada in Algonquin Park, there's the eastern wolf, which are somewhat, possibly a separate species from the larger gray wolves that you see in Yellowstone National Park or out west. And the thing is that coyotes are much closer related to these smaller wolves, and the fact that Dr. Filippi went into hybridization and stuff, you know, both species, when they're under duress, they seek out the closest thing to their own kind. And hybridization usually takes place between coyotes and these small wolves because of, like Dr. Filippi pointed out, size. There's been no evidence of the larger gray wolves and coyotes hybridizing. But coyotes do adapt to competitors. So whether they were wiped out by competition or once the Ice Age ended and other species disappeared, there wasn't enough biodiversity to have multiple carnivores in an ecosystem, we don't know. But supposedly Long Island was home to one of these smaller wolf species. And the amazing thing is that, like Dr. Filippi said, is that these coyotes, I mean, animals are adapting to changes wrought by human beings. We're seeing it in Europe. We're seeing the continental equivalent of the coyote, the Eurasian jackal, expanding its range into much of parts of Western Europe. And I have to say it again, it's so wonderful to meet Isabella Rossellini. I'm up through the roof, if I could say that. But being from Italy, Italy is experiencing an expansion, wolf recovery, and also Eurasian jackals are colonizing much of the peninsula. And it's similar to what we've seen with the coyotes. Sure, right, loss of competitors, even though a lot of the jackal expansion is corresponding with wolf recovery, so both species are coexisting to a degree. Coyotes certainly benefited from the eradication of competitors. They benefited from altering some habitats. You know, there's always this belief that coyotes are just endemic to open prairies and arid desert areas, but coyotes have adapted to high elevations. They've adapted to closed forest ecosystems, which are usually, associated with wolves. But the coyotes that we do have, again, what Dr. Filippi says, they matter in the sense that they are carrying endangered wolf genes in them. And there's been a new interest, and something my group has advocated for many years, and has unfortunately been rejected very much for that argument. But a lot of wolf conservation groups are now seeing the value of coyotes carrying these wolf genes. So the coyotes on Long Island in some ways are bringing the wolf back to the ecosystem that was eradicated during the colonial era. And there is a population of coyotes in Texas that has endangered red wolf genes, and they're being seen for conservation value. So you could say that the wolf has returned to some degree. Black bears, they were here, I guess to some extent. Long Island was a white-tailed deer dominated ecosystem where coyotes, this small wolf species and white-tailed deer type of ecosystem where those wolves depended on white-tailed deer. So, there you go. So, yes, Dr. Filippi, I love her with all my heart, and she's right. I don't care for the term mesopredator. I guess it's my Napoleon complex, Mrs. Rossellini. I loved her in that I have that DVD. But, mesopredators, like Dr. Filippi says, is really a description of the trophic level of certain carnivores. Where, usually by size and niche, if there's apex predators, much larger predators that they compete with, that keep them in this middle area. And yes, coyotes, when competing with wolves and cougars, they're fine being in that middle area, all right? They adapt to that. We're seeing that in Yellowstone and a lot of other areas that wolves and coyotes parallel. And you could say that coyotes often view us in that same sense. Coyotes are fine being second, all right? They don't have to be first. And this is why you could teach them. I know that sounds pretty ridiculous, but they are dogs after all. You could teach them to avoid conflicts with the public because they could view us as apex predators. And like the same respect they give wolves, they could give to human beings. But the bobcat, raccoon, which is the consummate suburban predator, they're all over the place. They're pigeons with 4 legs. Bald eagles have come back, like Ms. Rossellini said, tremendous wildlife recovery. Certainly Seed is doing great work in bringing bobwhite quail. Did I say it? I only know that they taste good. I don't know that, I'm kidding, I'm sorry. The coyote told me that. But, the bald eagles are coming back. The red fox is also misunderstood. At one time it was the apex predator of Long Island, but now it's got to move to the side because the coyote is now the apex predator. But the red fox that we have here are endemic North American red foxes. There were some foxes that may have been brought here by the British during the colonial era for fox hunting, but genetic work shows that red fox are indeed North American that exist here. We did have gray fox. We don't know if they still exist. They may have been trapped out, but they are common throughout the Northeast and the country. So the diet, just going over similar to what Dr. Filippi said, coyotes are generalists. They are carnivores, so they're in the family of the carnivora, which has the cats, the hyenas, the bears, the raccoons, skunks, weasels, meerkats, and even the seals and walruses are on the other side of it too. But the coyote is technically an omnivore because they could eat just about anything. There's an old cowboy saying, what does a coyote eat? Anything it could chew. And that's pretty much literally the truth. And all the orthodontists love that quote too. It'll take you a while to get used to my jokes. Just rattle your jewelry like John Lennon said. Nobody got that joke. But, they do eat, rodents, You know, and that, like Dr. Filippi said, that there's a benefit to that, especially with the high rates of Lyme disease we have on the island. White-footed mice are the main vectors of Lyme disease. So having multiple predators controlling these rodent populations is a benefit and an asset for Long Island itself. Deer fawns and scavenging deer carcasses is pretty much the high abundance of white-tailed deer throughout the Northeast is definitely what aided in the success of the coyote colonizing. I mean, there's a lot of myths between western coyotes and eastern coyotes. Coyotes are coyotes. Western coyotes are just as social. They live in family groups the same way. They hunt ungulates like elk calves and mule deer fawns, pronghorn fawns. So it's not, the eastern coyote doesn't have a monopoly on it. But the eastern coyote, as Dr. Filippi said, is aided, and I believe Ariel said this initially, is aided in the fact that its combination of wolf and dog genes physically gives it somewhat of an advantage in hunting larger animals. Not that they're successful at it, and they certainly don't do it as much as wolves do. There's no replacement for wolves. Coyotes are not a replacement. We certainly need wolves back in the Northeast, and there is an effort to do that. But we could learn to appreciate the wolf-like animal we have at the present, and that's the coyote. Fruits and vegetables, because their doctor told them it's good for them. No, they didn't like that joke either. All right, well, they eat fruits and vegetables. All right, birds, which I'm sure any ornithologists here are not very happy with. Insects and rabbits, and we've had a great boon of eastern cottontails the last several years, and this is probably due to mild winters and such. But now that we have a full complex of predators, from raptors to fox, coyote, the rabbits are probably going to be not too happy. The potential impacts. All right, we're in the initial stages of coyotes on Long Island, and we could certainly make all sorts of assumptions, and we could certainly make all sorts of, I don't know, what's the word? Predictions, thank you. That's why she's a professor. About how the ecosystem would play out. Personally, and I'm sure my colleagues agree, and I'm sure many of you, if you're environmentally conscious, is that any ecosystem with predators in it is a better and healthier ecosystem than without. And it certainly will come with some cost. You know, we're trying to mitigate conflict. My group has attempted to mitigate conflicts with coyotes in Connecticut, New Jersey, Westchester, New York City, and now that they're here, you know, I'm pretty thrilled to have them on Long Island. But, you know, Canada geese are now, you know, resident. They're not migratory anymore, and you know, there's a lot of this has to do with loss of habitat in other areas in the south that the geese go to, and also it's the habitat we've created. We've created an amicable habitat for a lot of this wildlife, and that's a good thing. Wildlife is adapting to us, but you know, the coyotes could show a balance with some of these other animals that have been, you know, a little complacent over the years, and geese are certainly one of them. Rodents, as you can see up in the top left. The turkeys, you know, turkeys certainly, I'm glad they're recovering. I haven't seen them by me yet, but you know, turkey are affected by habitat change. They're affected by weather conditions. You know, very cold spring could kill a clutch. So predators, yeah, they can take their toll on ground nesting birds. But having a complement of predators, you would inadvertently have competition between them, which limits the predator numbers and actually, like Ariel said initially, increases biodiversity and increases survivability. So a lot of people think that having the coyote, they're going to eat everything in sight, and that's just not the case. Red foxes are starting to recover. If you read my flyer there, from bouts with sarcoptic mange. They're making their way back into a lot of places on the island, which is great, and that's good, because like my two lovely colleagues here said earlier, the controlling of Lyme disease, which foxes seem to be much more effective than other predators because they eat a lot of the white-footed mice. Studies in the Hudson Valley are showing that the increase of fox populations lessens the rates of Lyme disease emergency visits with the public. So that's a benefit of having foxes. Coyotes and foxes, there's, being an organization like mine, and I'm a layperson, I'm not an academic, so you could say I'm anthropomorphic or whatever you want to say. But, I see a lot of interspecific conflicts, and it's a big interest of mine, the competition between predators. And coyotes are amazing in that, we've tried to eradicate them for over 100 years, and they've actually expanded. Jackals, the same in Europe. Wolves, a little more sensitive, but if given the chance, wolves are highly intelligent. To me, they're just big coyotes, and they can adapt and recover as well, and we're seeing that in parts of the world, and even here in the United States. In healthy environments, carnivores can adjust to each other. So we're seeing coyotes adapt to larger predators. We're seeing foxes adapt, especially in suburban areas where there's tons of food. Foxes and coyotes tolerating each other for a degree. They're not going out for a drink, but they're learning to coexist because they're, spatially regulating each other. See, and I'm not a professor. So they learn to share the resources. And we see that with fox and coyote. In fact, just before my cameras got stolen, I got fox and coyote in the Port Washington area regularly. So the coyotes and the foxes, and I know that Dr. Filippi gets fox on her camera as well in the Manhasset area. And in Plandome, where our other two, we're missing two of our other lovely colleagues, Jennifer Murray and Hilda Polsdor. That's it, Polsdor. Hilda is following coyotes in Plandome, where the coyotes and the foxes seem to share a territory and seem to have somewhat sharing a den site as well in some cases. So that's amazing. I wish he was here to describe it. So it's not always red in tooth and cool. As far as deer go, I know a lot of people anticipate coyotes are going to affect the deer. Really not seeing that as much, at least at this moment. There's lots of fawns. Deer are expanding. I think the Long Island State Parks are monitoring a coyote on the Barrier Islands, and that coyote has been actively hunting adult deer to some degree, but it always corresponds with snow. If we get some snow, and it's very Darwin because there's a lot of deer down there in the South Shore, so they possibly have a lot of sickly and infirm deer, so they make easy targets. But in much of the other area, we're not seeing the coyotes bother with the deer too much because there's just so much else to eat. So, told you to have to pinch me. All right, so this is pretty much the sightings where coyotes have been seen, and we all agree that now. Years ago I was probably a little pessimistic about. I saw a coyote. Well, it was probably a fox. But coyotes can turn up just about everywhere now. We have at least 20 adults possibly on the island, at least 20 adults in 5 family groups that have been consistent over several years. Now, unfortunately for me and Dr. Filippi, a pair of coyotes that I was following as well, the male got killed on the Northern State Parkway in March. So that would negatively affect his mate. And we were hoping that they would breed because this male was by himself for many, many years in the Searingtown area. So he finally got a girlfriend, and unfortunately he didn't make it. But these are all the sightings that we've had through the years, and certainly you could go on the CTUC Coyote Tracker and register any potential sightings, even foxes, as part of the mammal survey with the DEC as well. They're trying to see what mammals are showing up in certain areas. You could call me if you have any questions or if there's any conflicts or whatever. But yeah, coyotes could certainly turn up in Bellport at any time. So roll out the welcome mats. Is this me? Or this is my last one, and I'll leave you in peace. You can all, So here, this is a good picture in showing that you have a coyote up there from the Bronx that they've been successfully breeding for the last several years. I could say a decade, possibly. And that was by Gotham Coyote Project, who's monitoring them in the city. And here was one of the first coyotes we saw on the east end, on the South Fork. at the Wesnowski's potato farm. This male coyote who was down in the watermill area. And it's believed that he died of old age. I don't know if he's still alive. Do you have any? Nothing? Nothing? It's possibly he's, lived past his expiration date. But this was 2013, right? So you can see, coyotes could expand further east. Our colleague Jennifer Murray is monitoring coyotes on the North Fork. So the expansion has been very rapid within the last 5 years. And once coyotes figure out how to get here, and it is a complicated journey, they're as good as gold to adapt and acclimate and expand. So it should be a good thing, and we're all here to help to ease this transition, to coexist with them, and to not make the 6 o'clock news like other areas, which is not as often, like Ariel said. So, all right, so that's it. Mr.
So my section is slightly less interesting, but thank you. So I know it might sound like we have all the answers and there's a lot to learn still. We do know a lot, but we're really looking forward to seeing how the coyote is going to affect our local ecology. We want to know, the relatedness between each other in varying groups. We're conducting a diet study to figure out exactly how they're going to be affecting those mesopredators that my colleague talked about, so red fox, raccoon, deer, and geese. And also we want to engage the public about coyotes and figure out, where they're seeing them so we can get a better picture of how they're migrating throughout our island. So Seatuck Environmental Association sort of piloted this Long Island Coyote Study Group. We brought together a bunch of other nonprofits, academics, independent researchers, government organizations, to really use all of our knowledge and resources to figure out, how we can monitor the impacts and sort of work together to have events like this and teach the public about coyote colonization. So the current goals of the Coyote Study Group are as follows. Again, we want to document the establishment of coyotes on Long Island. We want to monitor their population and their migration. We also have trained volunteers and colleagues to assist in field work, so collecting scat and setting up trail cameras. And of course, again, to educate Long Islanders on how to best coexist with coyotes. So if you go on Seatuck's website, it's seatuck.org, we have many community science projects, which basically engages the public with submitting wildlife photos. So we have a river otter tracker, diamondback terrapin watch, river herring survey. I mean, you name it, we have a survey for it. And it's really simple and it's free and easy to use. It's basically just an absence-presence survey. So we want to know what you've seen, when you saw it, and where. For the coyote, we have the coyote tracker there. There's a QR code on the screen. You can use your cell phone to scan it with your camera app, and a little link should pop up once it focuses. So you tap on that and it'll upload a website. Or again, you could visit our website and enter in the URL, seatuck.org/coyote tracker. And that's sort of a preview of what our survey looks like. So it's embedded in our website. You can also download the free Survey 123 app if you're an avid wildlife enthusiast and you're out on trails or you're at the beach. You can download all of our apps for all of our surveys and have them all in one place. So I generally like that because if I'm on the beach doing a seabird survey, I can submit my sightings for diamondback terrapins, and it's just easy to have it all in one place. But after the discussion, if you want a little tutorial on how to navigate through the survey, I'm happy to do that. And yeah, I told you, quick, painless. So right now we can open it up to any questions, comments, concerns, and also Our contact information and some resources for you to follow up on are on this slide. So please feel free to take a picture and email us with any questions. CTUC's website is on there. A guidance to avoid coyote conflict, which was established by the DEC, is on there. And Frank's Facebook page, which is a great resource. He always shares really great articles about wild canids. So thank you so much. Sure, question in the back?
Thank you for your very informative talk, and you really brought out some really positive aspects of coyotes. But as a skeptic, and also a person who sees so many deer on the property, I feel that perhaps you've not faced some of the more conflicting type of situations you might be having. Do they carry any form of disease, Lyme's disease themselves? And how do you prevent them from eating your pet?
Right, that's a very valid question. I appreciate that question. Thank you so much for that. I would actually pass it off to my colleague, Dr. Lisa Filippi, to talk about any sort of disease transmission. And then as far as conflict resolution and any sort of relationship with pets, I would definitely going to pass that off to Frank Vincenti as well. He is he is an expert at the hazing part of this talk. My stuff. Thank you very much.
Okay, so as far as rabies goes, we seem to have a very low incidence of rabies in coyotes. They're not known to be transmitting on Long Island. The bigger threat in that regard is raccoons. Raccoon squirrels, okay, so they have a much higher rate. In terms of Lyme disease, they could certainly pick it up. I don't know for a fact that they are not good competent vectors, but reservoirs of the disease, they do get exposed to it. They certainly, any animal that's running around on Long Island, including humans, is getting bitten by ticks, and so there's a risk of that. So I don't know that it's going to increase Lyme disease. Their bodies are not as big as deer, and that's the reason deer are so problematic with Lyme disease. Their bodies are huge, so they raise a lot of ticks. But to be frank, deer are not competent reservoirs of Lyme disease. So Lyme disease does not grow inside of deer. However, because the deer have big bodies, they can support a lot of ticks. And that's where the ticks go for their mating rituals. So they mate on deer, the adult ticks. And that's how deer contribute to the increase in Lyme disease.
Yeah, like you said earlier, the main vectors of Lyme disease are the white-footed mice. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be disappointed, but chipmunks also carry Lyme disease. And they see a lot of correlation with the increase in acorns and the chipmunk population with an increase in transmission of Lyme disease. So that's why having coyotes and foxes is good in regulating the vectors. Like Dr. Filippi said, I didn't know that white-tailed deer were a motel for ticks. A Caribbean vacation for ticks, a white-tailed deer. But yeah, I mean, you're never going to get rid of ticks, especially with the change in climate. You know, there's an increase in all sorts of insect populations and such. You want to control the vector species, and we've created an artificial habitat for rodents that increases their population, and it's good to have the predators to regulate. So, like Dr. Filippi said earlier, you know, coyotes are dogs. So there's really been no studies done on it, but wolves and coyotes, closely related to domestic dogs, they get exposed to Lyme disease. Now, coyotes are lucky in many places to live past 2 years old. So we don't see the lasting effects of Lyme disease in coyotes, arthritic populations, neurological, whatever Lyme disease causes. So there hasn't been any in-depth studies. So I'm sure a coyote that lives to an old age in a heavily Lyme area has debilitating effects of Lyme disease as well, like a domestic dog. Studies in the city have shown that coyotes are exposed to heartworm as well from all the mosquitoes. But coyotes are not vectors of these diseases. So a tick that gets on a coyote with Lyme disease already has it. They're not going to get it from the coyote and hop on another host and spread Lyme disease from the coyote. The tick had the Lyme disease originally from the beginning. So, and to answer the question, because I left my bulletproof vest at home, as far as coyotes and pets, that's the majority of the conflicts throughout the country, and to be honest, it doesn't have to happen. I've dealt with some very habituated coyotes in the tri-state area, in New Jersey, Westchester, New York City, and I'm very aggressive and assertive to them. It's sort of like dog training. You know, you act very confident, and I chase them. I don't expect you to do that, but you know, the meager yelling at them and throwing something towards them and discouraging them from the beginning. Once it's done in the beginning, they don't develop poor habits and become complacent and habituated. As far as safeguarding pets, it's basically all common sense. Every conflict you see, and I know I may offend people, but every conflict between coyotes and dogs is the dog is off leash, the dog is alone in the yard, the dog is not being minded as a dog should be if it's your pet. As far as indoor-outdoor cats go, I recommend, and I know my bird conservationist is probably going to get mad at me, but I recommend cats being, if you could let them out during the day, avoid dusk and nighttime. A lot of other agencies, the state, recommend these things. Like I said, common sense. I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm Frank. But, you know, so using common sense. If you're taking care of feral cat colonies, limit the amount of food. Don't put a lot of food out. Make sure that the target animals, the cats that you're feeding, get the food. Right? These people that take care of ferals do a lot of hard work. I give them a lot of credit. But it's common sense stuff. Walking with your dog. Keep your dog on a leash. Unfortunately, we had an incident last couple of months in the Roslyn area where in a nature preserve we've had coyote activity, and the locals sneak into the area with their pets on off hours to let their dogs run. It's not recommended and it's not allowed. Unfortunately, an off-leash dog had a scrap with a coyote and sustained some injuries. Dog is fine. But if the dog is on a leash, even if you're sneaking into areas you shouldn't belong, keep the dog on a leash. You encounter a coyote on the trail, be aggressive. Don't cower. All right? They understand dominance. All right? They're dogs. So, and again, you could always call me. My group hazes, and we do it for free. Just, you know, maybe pack a lunch for us. No, I'm kidding. We do it as a courtesy for the public, so, right?
And just about cats, songbirds have really diminished on Long Island, and that's because of cats being let loose outdoors. It's not just feral cats, but it's people's pet cats. I have 3 cats, and I never let them out. You know, they have their little cat towers, and they're very happy indoors. And even feeding birds outside is not a good thing, because that attracts rodents, and then if you attract rodents, you're attracting coyotes who come to eat the rodents. So I still have lots of birds coming to my yard, but I don't use my bird feeders anymore. We just let the wild animals get their own food on their own. That's the way you're supposed to work in a ecosystem.
Haven't you noticed there's been a lot more songbirds now with the coyotes in it? I've seen a lot of birds that I'm not a bird expert, but I've seen a lot of birds that I've never seen before, whether it's weather patterns or certain migratory patterns change. But the presence of coyotes does increase the survivability of songbirds. This has been shown in other areas because the feral cats or indoor-outdoor cats will avoid these areas, if not through direct predation. And you know, we did an initial diet study, and we found really no cats. Yeah.
So in our diet study, so if they're eating whatever's most abundant and is going to give them the biggest bang for their buck. So they don't want to eat little tiny mice, because nothing. Little tiny birds, they don't want to eat. They want to eat larger animals, and raccoons are the most abundant in the survey area where I work, and that is the biggest thing that they're eating. On my cameras, I see cats all the time. The cats manage to stay away from the coyotes. I've seen the same cats for 4 years on my cameras. So cats are not a favored food of coyotes, but raccoons certainly are. At least at my sense. Other questions? Oh, there was a question?
Yeah, if I walked out the door right now,
Yes.
how far would I go before I would have the chance of crossing the path with a coyote?
Good question, I have no idea, because
Like-
I haven't seen any coyotes around here. But I will say, in urban areas, in Chicago, in Denver, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, coyotes are walking around on the streets where people are. We don't have that high density here, and I don't think we ever will, to tell you the truth. But I haven't had any reports of coyotes in this immediate area. But you can imagine that any area that has a lot of green, a lot of trees, a lot of shelter, and a lot of small animals for them to feed on, they're eventually going to have coyotes.
So if you jaywalk, you're gonna get a summons.
Great.
So you're probably more likely to get a summons than
I mean, as you go east,
How's
you,
those odds?
well, I said, as you go east, you get more to the Yaphank, the Pine
Actually,
Barrens.
our highest density of coyotes are in the hyper-suburban environments
Yeah.
of Western Nassau, because that's the
Well,
edge
because,
of it.
but also because they came in from the Bronx and the city, and now they're moving their way west. So I'm imagining all of the Gold Coast mansions, all of those huge parks that have been established from those places, they're all going to eventually have coyotes.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Do coyotes hunt all day long or primarily at night?
So their favorite time is crepuscular, so in the evening and in the daytime, in the evening and in the early morning. But they can hunt, I've seen them on my cameras at all different times of day. So, they prefer not to be conspicuous and not to be out where people are in broad daylight. And in fact, I think that daytime used to be their preferred hunting time in the west, am I wrong, Frank? Yeah.
Well, like you said, they act.
But they're adapting to humans, so they're out when you're not. They tend to be, right?
Where they're heavily persecuted, they're gonna be nocturnal to avoid people.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
Lisa, how do I protect my chickens?
I know, that's the answer you're waiting for. Literally, I've done research on this for you, and what I found was llamas. You gotta get a llama. And, no, really, one llama, I think is a really good thing. And also, I know you're worried about children with the dogs, but I think that there are a lot of breeds of dogs that are great with kids, and coyotes don't like them.
This is to have a dog that protects my sheep, my goats, and the chicken. But I'm sometimes afraid they could be aggressive, and we have a lot of children.
Yeah, no,
Because
I
they're
hear you.
territorial, so they protect what's there.
There's what they call flagging, which they did in Europe for many, many centuries to keep wolves away. And you can hang flag-like stuff that blow in the wind.
Yeah, stuff
And
like
that's a
that.
non-invasive, humane thing. Now they're starting to use it out west. They're finally realizing with the increase in wolf population, and unfortunately, there's been an increase in livestock conflicts. They're using the old methods, and that works for coyotes too. Pinwheels, party favors.
And I see on golf courses, I see these metallic, they look like rules, like this, like they're running, and I think that also is to deter probably geese, but also,
Yes, yes, yes.
yeah.
Well, animals are more visual, as you know.
And they're territorial.
Predator.
Predatory animals in particular. So anything abnormal is going to unnerve them, like the flagellator. Anything that doesn't appear what they're used to, their prey drive is, is going to turn them off. And the thing with livestock, I mean, the livestock, oh, thank God. She's like a nice Italian mother. She's trying to feed me all the time. But the thing with, livestock predation is that it has to start with some sort of complacency, so to speak. So I mean, if you keep the property nice, you don't leave carcasses, and you know, a lot of other places, like upstate, dairy farmers, probably a cow dies, rather than incinerate the carcass, they take it out to the edge of the field. How many times have you heard that? Well, that attracts in the scavengers and the coyotes, the bears, and that makes them develop a potential taste for livestock. Whereas many studies have shown that predators will avoid livestock if there's abundant natural prey. And coyotes are no different. I mean, you know, it's common sense stuff. So, and you'll be successful. We're here to help. So.
Do you put the chickens in a coop at night?
Yes, all the animals are, not the sheep and the goat, I mean, they are put in smaller enclosed spaces, but if they want, they can go into a shed or not. But I see them sleeping mostly outside in the summer. But in the winter, they go in their shed. But the chickens and the ducks, we all lock them in. They go naturally into their coop, but we'll go and close the door because of the raccoons.
So I think that that's going to be a big deterrent as well. And again, this book that I just finished reading, the farmers were all worried about livestock, and it turns out that the coyotes were not eating the livestock. They were eating the rats and things.
And the rats.
Yeah.
So I have two questions. One is it true that coyotes don't like it when you rearrange your garden furniture? And that is an actual deterrent method?
Yes.
And the other question is, are there any studies that could support the use of either olfaction of predators, like smell of a
So there's
or
coyote
acoustic?
urine. Yeah, there's urine that you can spread around because they're
Does it
territorial.
work?
We're working on acoustic stuff, right?
I am working on acoustic.
I mean, the wolf urine, with all due respect, I don't like to disagree with Dr. Flippy. I'm a huge fan of hers, and I love her dearly. The wolf urine is a popular thing, but keep in mind that coyotes and wolves are dogs. So when you go to the dog park and you have a Chihuahua, and the Great Dane had urinated in that spot, what does the Chihuahua do? Urinate over the Great Dane's spot. That's what coyotes and wolves do. The presence, coyotes have adapted to wolves in Yellowstone. I know I'm probably contradicting, and with all due respect, I'm not. I'm not an expert. I'm a layperson, but the coyotes and the wolves will definitely kill coyotes if they get a chance, but wolves are not spending all their energy trying to kill coyotes. In fact, there's been so many amazing interactions. The coyote population in Yellowstone has actually bounced back, thankfully to the wolves, because wolves provide carcasses throughout the winter for them. And the risk of getting killed doesn't matter. It's sort of like riding the sun. I'm kidding. But, you know, the coyotes have adapted to the wolf presence. So you can imagine that wherever wolves are marking, coyotes are marking over it. And they have this tit-for-tat dog there. If you want to use it, you know, I'm not opposed to using wolf urine. You know, she's doing great work with acoustic things. That could possibly be the new method. I'm friendly with a scientist in Africa that is using urine in the sense that he's with African wild dogs, which my group was involved with, that he's using it to delineate territory boundaries. So, but that's tricky because you have to know where the boundary ends. And like with dogs, I mean, it's dog 101, you sprinkle the urine in these buffer areas, and that acts as a marker, a natural marker to keep from trespassing. But in a lot of ways, I'll tell you a funny story. I don't want to take too much time. Can I say it's a funny story? You don't mind, do you? With my work in Westchester many years ago, there was a family in Armonk, I think, that was, you know, the coyote population is pretty stable in Westchester. They put coyote urine over online to keep the deer out. And that doesn't work either, because deer coexist with coyotes, even though sometimes deer get eaten. But they were using the coyote urine in their yard. And then, not only were they upset about the deer, they were upset that local coyotes were coming in their yard and urinating. So in essence, they were artificially making it out like this trespassing coyote was in their yard, and the local resident coyotes were upset about it, and they were coming in. So that's what urine, I mean, there's a huge business about it, but yeah, I mean, rearranging furniture, as simple as that, throws them off, it unnerves them. So we've had enough of these.
Other questions? Go for it.
More and more people are fencing in their private property, so animals like turtles or rabbits get caught or are limited to their movement. How is that affecting the coyote and population?
So we don't have any data on that, but I can tell you, I have seen coyotes jump over a 4-foot fence or a 5-foot fence without even running. Just. So, yeah. Tracks went right up to the fence and then just leaped over. So they're pretty good with jumping over fences, but I think that, again, if there's a barrier that makes life a little more difficult, they're going to choose the easiest route. Right? I feel sorry for the turtles and the rabbits, though, especially the box turtles. They can't get home. Anybody else? Yeah.
I'm wondering about the landfill areas that are around here. Aren't the coyotes attracted to that kind of an area?
I mean, if there's lots of other rodents and those types of animals that would be attracted, sure. You know, they will definitely forage wherever the most likely place to find food is.
You know, this interest in urban, I'll take that connection. The interest in urban, sorry, am I too close to the mic? The interest in urban wildlife, which has increased over the last several years with academics and universities and lay people, whatever, is that many of these animals just need meager amounts of green space to travel and reside. I mean, coyotes, we could focus on coyotes, but we could talk about deer, we could talk about black bear or living in suburban environments with meager green space, that they just need enough to get away from the public. Foxes and raccoons have been doing it for many decades. So, I mean, like Dr. Filippi said, if there's food that presents itself there, and even the smallest amount of green space, they'll do well. So, I mean, Dr. Filippi is fortunate she's monitoring coyotes on an estate area, so that's abundant green space. But some of the coyotes that I've been following are living in strips of green space, surrounded by hyper-suburban areas. So they're using the green space as travel and to lay up during the day, whatever, get away from the public. And at night they come into the residential and they pick off a bunny here and there, or, you know. So they don't need much anymore. So.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I have a probably silly question, but how do I tell the difference between a coyote and a dog?
I have a perfect web page for you. So on CTUP's website, we have a page dedicated to a bunch of our priority species, one of them, of course, being coyotes. And we have on this web page how to tell the difference. Basically, is it a coyote? So little markers like how the tail hangs, you know, it kind of hangs really low. You have that black markings, as you see pointed out with the red arrows. We also go into the difference between coyotes and red fox, because a lot of the time that's also, people get confused, which is totally understandable because they look very similar. So we kind of tease out different identification markers. So when you see something and you take a photo, you can say, oh, that's probably a red fox because the tail hangs outward, as you see a little more, versus the coyote as it kind of slacks down. And also, of course, like the classic black socks that we call on the red fox. So this is a great resource if you want to check it out. We have different facts that you can look through. And also frequently asked questions section at the bottom. That's always a great reference.
Thank you.
I thought I saw one more hand. Yes.
I was just curious if they swim.
They swim. Yeah, they do. We've had them wash up on beaches, carcasses. But I think, so one washed up on the beach in Asheroken. It had a bullet hole in it. So, right, but I think that one came from Connecticut. That's what I'm thinking, that it washed across the sound and landed on the beach at Asheroken. But they do swim. They definitely swim. So, they can islands hop, if you will. Anybody else? Okay.
Thank you so much.
So we really thank you so much for having us. Keep those surveys and then I'll collect them on your way out. That would be really helpful for you. Thank you so much.